Let's welcome in Andy Staples of On3 to the program. Happy Friday, Andy. It's the slower part of the year, but there's definitely still a lot going on.
No, I don't even. Are there slow parts of the year anymore? This is. But once Nico hit, it just feels like everything sped up again. It was like, okay, we're just gonna roll right into the season now,
which is fine for our purposes, right?
Oh yeah. Better being bored.
Yeah, you don't want nothing going on. That's the scary part.
Well, Andy, we've got a lot of Nebraska questions for you. Obviously, over-unders came out this week. Nebraska's at 7.5. A lot of debate about Dylan Raiola heading into his sophomore year. I mean, just what's your big picture view of Matt Rule in year 3, knowing his history as a head coach in year 3s?
Yeah, we actually had a question on this on our show the other day on the mailbag show, and it was basically, given Matt Rule's year 3s, what's a reasonable expectation for success for Nebraska this year? And, if you look at Temple in year 3 and Baylor in year 3, they're huge jumps. They went from essentially 500 teams to double-digit win teams. And the question is, can he do that at Nebraska this year? I don't think he has to do that. I don't think they have to be a double-digit win team for this to be a successful season. Obviously, they're in a tougher conference than either of those teams were. But I think solid, steady improvement. Don't lose games you're not supposed to lose. Like, take away a UCLA type game from last year. And that's really all you need, because I do feel like Nebraska has reached the point where it is a competent football program. I think all of the stuff that I know Nebraska fans are scarred because they went through these years where you had all these one possession losses and all these bad things kept happening. When so many narrow losses happen, you realize, okay, it's not luck. This is a poorly run program. I don't think it's a poorly run program anymore. I think it's a very competently run program now. And I think that makes a huge difference. So I think get rid of, like, the UCLA game was the one, I would say, outlier of a game last year where you're like, Nebraska's going to win this. And they go in and it's like, what the hell just happened? Everything else you can live with. Like the Iowa game, okay, they were winning in the fourth quarter, but Iowa was good. It's okay. Iowa was at home. So it still was a very close game. So I think they're right there, on the cusp of more improvement. And then, look, we went through their schedule. If they improve quite a bit, double-digit wins is not off the table. Playing Iowa at the end of the season with both of them being fringe playoff contenders is not off the table. But they're going to have to show us that, through the Michigan game and the Minnesota game. Like, those are the ones that you got to be able to figure out how to win if you're going to veer into double-digit win territory.
Andy, in my opinion, there's probably very few people who walk the earth that are as equipped to answer this question than you are.
It's a barbecue question.
The question is, can Nebraska, and this is what it's always in the back of Nebraska fans' minds, I think, and nobody really knows, but can Nebraska get back? Can Nebraska accelerate as a program in this day and age to where Ohio State is, to where Oregon is, right now to where Penn State is? Is that Michigan? Is Nebraska?
I don't know about annually, but I do think they can get to where they're competitive with those teams on a regular basis.
Okay.
I don't know if it's like Ohio State has advantage, and Ohio State is an outlier. Ohio State's never been bad in its history. Like, there's no other program in the country that can claim that. And so that's a little bit different. But yes, I mean, when you look at the way things are going, the NIL era, the transfer portal era, there's no reason Nebraska can't be competitive at the top level every few years, because a lot of the things that were impediments for Nebraska that caused them to not be so good in, from the early 2000s to now, they've been taken away. Because, like, geography doesn't matter as much. Geography became extremely important for a while. Mm-hmm. Now it's not. Recent success, how many guys you've put in the NFL in the last 5 years, mattered a great deal in the super team era, in the 2000, basically the Nick Saban at Alabama era. That doesn't matter as much because you can offer more money. So the things that kept Nebraska down, I think, are gone. Now they have to manage this correctly. So this is up to Matt Rule. This is up to Troy Dannon to manage it well. But it's possible to do that. And I do think, we haven't seen it yet, but I do think in the NIL era, whoever helps Nebraska get back where they want to go, whichever players that happens to be, and it will happen, those people will be legends, and they will be well compensated for that.
Yes. Yes.
Andy, Dylan Raiola obviously is a lightning rod topic too. Just the expectations on him heading into his sophomore year. We saw very good versions of Raiola at times, and then a freshman version of him at times last year. What are your thoughts of him going into year two, especially with maybe what appears to be upgraded receivers across the board, an accomplished running back in Emmett Johnson behind him, and ideally maybe the best offensive line Nebraska's had in a few years?
Well, and that's why I've seen, like, my co-host Ari Wasserman, I think he's a little more down on him than I am. My thing is, we have not seen him as a sophomore yet. The biggest jumps tend to come between year one as a starter and year two as a starter for quarterbacks. So let's see what he does this year. And like you said, they've put more around him. You know, I'm thinking about Dane Key. Like, Dane Key's a guy that at Kentucky you thought, okay, this guy's all set to break out, and they could never get him the ball. Like, if Raiola can get Dane Key the ball, how good that relationship going to be? You know, that's the thing I'm interested in. If you look at Raiola last year, yeah, as the schedule got harder, he got worse, and you would expect that from a freshman. Now, how much of that was the offense? They did change offenses in the middle of the year last year. I mean, essentially changed coordinators in the middle of the year, and now they're running Dana Holgorsen's offense. So, you know, can Dana Holgorsen make it a more QB-friendly offense that helps him be better? Because, you know, the last game where he averaged over 8 yards per attempt was the Purdue game. That was September 28th. Everything after that was pretty tough sledding. The Wisconsin game and the bowl game were fairly efficient, but you know, he can be a lot better. He has the raw materials to do it. So we need to see, how does he handle pressure? Is he better this year than he was last year under pressure? Can he get the ball out? Can he get the ball out on time? If he can do all those things, then Nebraska will be better. You know, I'm more worried about their defense replacing what they lost. They'll be new, obviously, with a new coordinator. But I do think we're going to see improvement from Raiola. The question is how much improvement, because if it's a significant amount of improvement, then we're talking about a pretty tough team to beat here.
Andy, I just got one more Nebraska question. What impact do you think, what's your level of familiarity with Dana Holgorsen? What kind of impact do you think he can have?
Oh, very familiar. And, you know, he's come into places and done really well. The one, probably the biggest impact you saw was that first year, well, the only year he was at Oklahoma State, where they liked the offense that he brought so much, they just ran it for like 12 more years with different coordinators. And
interesting.
He's one of the people who helped craft the air raid. You know, he played for Hal Mumme and Mike Leach at Iowa Wesleyan, but then he worked with them at various stops. So he helped craft the air raid into what it was. He went away a long time ago from being a classic air raid coach, though. You know, he'll have three backs in the backfield. He'll do a lot of different things. When he had Trevon Wesco at West Virginia, he liked using the tight end more, which was not something the air raid guys tended to like to do. So he'll adapt to the personnel he has and try to make the best offense with the bones of the air raid, but he'll adapt to what he has. And if they have a good offensive line and they like the backs, they're going to run a ton. And if it's not going to be like Leach, who is only going to run if you have a super light box. Otherwise, they're throwing the three plays, that the Y stick, all the usual, so that little angle route with the running back. It's a lot more than that. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he wants to do with this group, because that was the thing with that Oklahoma State team when they had Brandon Whedon and Justin Blackman, but they also had some good backs. Like, he was running diamond formation with three running backs at times. When he was at West Virginia, he'd move Tavon Austin into the backfield and just hand him the ball.
Mhm.
So he's really good at figuring out what do his players do well and then emphasizing that.
Andy, I wanted to ask you too about the future of the college football playoff, because I know that's a big topic right now. If the Big Ten and the SEC want 4 auto bids each, is there anything that's going to stop that from happening?
I don't think so, because I've heard people saying this. It's interesting because this is something I think Greg Sankey was worried about, the SEC commissioner, a few years ago. That is, if you did auto bids, does it open you up to an antitrust challenge from the other leagues? Does it say you were acting as a cartel? You're saying you're above us.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, we always talk about with the players and what would solve all these issues. Well, a collective bargaining agreement, because the players agreed to it and the leagues agreed to it. Well, in this particular case, the leagues are the college football playoff. They're the ones who make it up. And so if they all agree to it, I don't think you have anything to worry about, because they've agreed to it. It's not a CBA, but it kind of is, because everybody involved has said, yeah, we're down for this. And so I think the way you get to that is you give those leagues enough money so that they are happy about it. And you give the ACC and the Big 12, who have a little more juice, enough access so they're happy about it. And it seems like, and we don't know this yet because they haven't actually decided on it, but it seems like 2 bids for the Big 12, 2 bids for the ACC is enough to make them happy. And then, the group of 6, because remember the Pac-12 is coming back, they'll get 1 spot, but they'll also get more money. And sometimes just saying, hey, would you like some more money, tends to solve some problems.
With the auto bids, how much more valuable will the television contracts get for those 2 leagues, the SEC and the Big Ten, knowing the additional inventory, the protection, the possible play-in games, the SEC Big Ten, where you don't have to worry about like having a committee decide that SMU is better than Alabama?
It's interesting you asked that question, Sean, because I'm not sure we're going to get to a point where the SEC and Big Ten are renegotiating their TV deals whole cloth. Like the SEC, when let's say they add the 9th conference game, which they're probably going to do if the auto bids go through, there'll be more money from ESPN. Like they'll tweak the contract, but they're not going to go renegotiate the whole contract. It doesn't run out until 2033. I don't know that in 2033, the SEC as an entity is negotiating a football contract. That may be whatever comes next, whether that's all of the leagues together, whether that's some super league that is made up of schools from different leagues. I don't know. But that's my guess, is the next time those guys go to the table, it's in a different form.
Andy, is this seating issue going to be rectified in time for the next round of playoffs, 2025?
We hope so. We hope so. Jim Phillips, the ACC commissioner, came out the other day and said they support it, which I think that basically leaves the Big 12. Everybody it's sort of like the, in the bar when somebody says something weird and everybody just stares at them. So now Brett Yormark is the guy at the bar that everybody's staring at. I think everybody else is fine with it. It's funny because there's really no incentive for the ACC or the Big 12 to say, let's do a straight seat. But it's also only 1 year. So like, how much leverage can you truly get from holding out on this when everybody knows it's better for the sport? Like we published what it would have looked like if it were seated straight last year. It's a better bracket. Like Oregon, the team that earned the easiest path because they went undefeated in the regular season,
right,
would have had the easiest path instead of one of the hardest paths. Penn State, which got rewarded for losing the Big Ten championship game with the seeding rules the way they were, would have faced a more difficult path. Like that's the way it's supposed to work.
Can commissioners, I always wonder this about Sankey and Petiti, Yormark, Phillips. I know they're tasked with protecting the interests of their conference. Can they also think about the good of college football? Is it possible?
Yeah, and they do. Like Sankey talks about that a lot. But the thing is, and I've thought about this a lot the last week or so, their job is still to take care of their conference.
Of course.
The paycheck comes from the conference. So you can talk all you want. It's sort of like, if you're a member of Congress, there are things that are good for the country that are not good for your constituents.
Sure.
You better take care of your constituents.
Right. Yeah, that's probably the God. I just like to see it sway the other way sometimes,
Well, and that's the thing. There would have to be some sort of change at the government level to make that happen. And they've talked about wanting an antitrust exemption so that they can create these NIL guardrails. I don't think they're going to get that, because I think it would essentially be, you can blatantly violate the Sherman Act to price fix a labor market, which I just can't see them doing that. But what I do think is interesting, and I do think is something that they may talk about, because it's something that kind of already exists, and you can say, hey, look, this already exists for some sports leagues that televise games. Why not add these people who are kind of the same kind of business? And that is Cody Campbell, who's the billionaire chairman of the board of regents at Texas Tech, used to play football there.
Yeah.
So he's on the Donald Trump committee that they just created. What he thinks they should do is add college football to the Sports Broadcasting Act of 1961, which is it's an old law, but it basically is what allows the NFL teams and the Major League Baseball teams and the NBA teams to sell their television rights as one. So, like, if they didn't have this protection, because it's an antitrust protection, if they didn't have that protection, like, the UFL could just sue the Cowboys and the 49ers and the NFL and say, you're acting as a cartel. This is a violation of the Sherman Act. And they'd probably win. And they're protected from that with this piece of legislation. You add college football to that, then all of a sudden, all of the leagues could get together and say, we'll sell this to ESPN, we'll sell this to Fox, we'll sell this to NBC. And because you're a single seller, you can sell it for more money. It's like, for example, college football now is like, you need a blender. And you can go to Target, you can go to Walmart, you can check Amazon. Mm-hmm. That's the Big Ten, that's the SEC, that's the Big 12 and the ACC. Okay. And you can kind of pit them all against each other to get the best deal. You want to buy NFL rights or NBA rights, there's one place to go.
One place.
And that means they can jack up the price because they have exclusivity.
That makes sense. Okay, we'll get you out of here on this, Sean. Our constituents would want to know this. Andy, is Nebraska an 8-win team, a 7-win team, a 9-win team? Where do you see them?
I think they're an 8-win team. Like, if I just look at the schedule and say, if the most average result of every game happens, what happens? I see 8-4. So I can go through the schedule. Cincinnati, Akron, Houston Christian, and we're not worrying about those. But Michigan's not a guaranteed loss. There's a coin flip in there. They should beat Michigan State. They should beat Maryland. Minnesota's going to be a little bit of a coin flip. They should beat Northwestern. USC's a coin flip. UCLA shouldn't be a coin flip, but we'll see.
It is,
as Nebraska learned the hard way last year. Now they've got Nico Iamaleava, and I actually liked what Deshaun Foster did at the end of last season. But then obviously it's a very tough end of the season with at Penn State and Iowa. So like I said, if it's just average result, I would see 8-4 at the end of this season. But let's say you do get massive improvement from Dylan Raiola, and you beat Michigan and beat Minnesota, and all of a sudden now you're looking at maybe 9-3, look at maybe 10-2. So, like, I would not expect a step back. I think a step back would be very discouraging. I think this is another step forward for Nebraska. I'm just not sure how big of a step forward it is.
Well, Andy, we appreciate all your time and your insight, and you and Ari do a great job with your show every day on the On3 channels here. What are your taping days in the off season?
So in the off season, we're Monday through Friday, 8:30 Central, and we're supposed to end at 9:30 Central. We rarely do. We tend to ramble on, but it's fun. Subscribe to the On3 Sports YouTube channel, and you'll get a push notification every time we go. For Nebraska fans, I would say check out Friday's show, because it's our mailbag show. The first question out of the gate was about Nebraska, and it was a lot of similar to the stuff that we talked about, and where they kind of fit in with the rest of the Big Ten. And I'm pretty optimistic that they are still climbing. So I think but there's such an interesting discussion because, they went through the hinterlands like they did. Mm-hmm. I think if I were a Nebraska fan, I would be wary of everything just because I lived through 2000, 10 to now, but I think you should feel pretty good about what you've got going and where it goes from here.
I think so too, Andy.
Well, Andy, thank you again for your time, and I'm sure we'll be catching up again here later this summer.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.